I should say welcome to True Health Tuesday, but it's not Tuesday. Okay, so we're going to talk about digestion. And with this brilliant thing here, we want to look at the liver, the stomach, and the pancreas. But also the most important part is the diaphragm. Now, your body's building 1 billion cells a day. That production is dependent on getting amino acids for the proteins, fatty acids for the fats, and usable sugars from the carbs. So where does that occur? Well, first, your nose. When you smell something, your body produces a certain acid. Like if you smell chicken, lamb, beef, broccoli, whatever, your stomach is going to produce a certain type of acid based on your smell, but also based on your thought. Like if you can imagine if you have a lemon right in front of you, just a slice of lemon, and you can smell that lemon, okay, and it smells amazing. Now you take a big bite into that lemon. Okay, how many people's mouth watered? So you can just think about this stuff. Now the problem is you've got one nerve that governs everything. It comes down on the front and back of the esophagus, and that's called the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is one of the cranial nerves, and there's 12 of them, and this is cranial nerve 10. So now, does that mean that any problem in the neck, like a loss of curve, reverse curve, some kind of problem with the neck will negatively affect the vagus nerve? Absolutely. Okay, and this is why we look at the upper neck area for everything, because when you look at a human being, you've got a normal neck, beautiful curve, brain doesn't stop at the skull, it extends the top third of the neck. Loss of curve or reverse curve in the neck is a big deal. That's one. So that's the nerve that controls everything. Controls digestion, controls movement, everything. The nerve right below that, C3, C4, C5, keeps you alive. That's the diaphragm. Now, why is the diaphragm so gosh darn important in digestion? Well, you got this diaphragm, this big old huge muscle. The stomach is right underneath it, the liver's right underneath it. And this muscle, every time you breathe in, okay, the diaphragm flattens out, pulling the lungs open, drawing air into the lungs. You breathe out, that diaphragm goes up. So all of this organ tissues, you're talking the pancreas, liver, the spleen's back here, kidneys are on both sides, the intestinal tract, everything. All of this is surrounded by a fluid called lymph. And every time you move your diaphragm, this massages these organs. But this is also when women get pregnant, the baby starts growing in here, pushes up on the diaphragm, and they lose the surface area. This is why when, girls have gone through this, they walk across the room and they're exhausted. Okay, so this is also why when we're checking someone for digestion, what do we look at first? We look at the neck. Because if that diaphragm's altered, you got altered gut function. Then, if this diaphragm is weak, you can actually have this part of the stomach pull up in here, and that's called a hiatal hernia. And every doctor knows that a hiatal hernia comes from a weak diaphragm, which is crazy because what do they prescribe? They prescribe antacids, which is foolishness. That's not going to strengthen the diaphragm. You got to find somebody that's going to correct the nerve in the neck and then teach them diaphragmatic breathing. So when that food, you chew it up here, your mouth produces the salivary amylase to break down the carbohydrates. You swallow the food gets in here in the stomach, and this is where protein digestion occurs. Now, this food, after it goes out of the stomach, it goes into this area called the duodenum. And the duodenum, this is right where the pancreas goes in. Now, what's interesting, as soon as fat hits this, there's sensors. And this gallbladder, which has been storing and concentrating bile, bile's the greatest emulsifier of fats. Now, as soon as fats hit here, that gallbladder contracts and leaches that bile in there to break down the fats and the fatty acids. Now, this drains through the same opening as the pancreas. Now, under physical, chemical, or emotional stress, your body secretes adrenaline, cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all these stress hormones, okay? And those stress hormones go in the blood, surrounded through. They hit the spleen hands over all of that stuff to the liver. And this is why the liver is forming that gallbladder, that bile. out of the blood. And blood only lasts 120 days. So you're always making new blood. Now, where do gallstones come from? They come from those concentrated stress hormones. And you could eliminate those, but also under mild or moderate chronic stress. This bile, instead of being, this beautiful green fluid, it becomes thick. And that thick bile is going to start to block the pancreas. And so when carbohydrate digestion begins here, then protein goes here, digestion begins here, then it goes through the duodenum. If that gallbladder can't excrete that bile, or that gallbladder has gallbladder sludge is what we call it, then the pancreas can't secrete its bicarb to raise that pH. Because this is really acidic. I mean, the stuff in the stomach, you could pour it on a piece of wood and it'll burn a hole right through it. The acid in here is amazing. But when it gets over here, that pancreas has got to raise that pH so that the rest of the absorption and breakdown of the nutrients can occur. But that gallbladder sludge, and this is why I teach the doctors to come in just about the midline, and we do this circle-like action in the middle of the area, and you can feel a line right here, which is where the gallbladder is, okay? And we break that and excrete that out. And then we'll go in on a soft tissue and work that pancreas. And you could feel the tail, body, and head of the pancreas. You can feel little ridges sometimes when that pancreas can get blocked in. Now, the pancreas does exocrine and endocrine function. It can help secrete insulin, regulates blood sugar, but its also job in digestion is to secrete this bicarbonate to raise that pH, because if this becomes really acidic, then the intestinal tract can't absorb the nutrients. And has anyone ever heard of small intestinal bacteria overgrowth? It's called SIBO. It's like epidemic proportion. Well, what happens under physical, chemical, or emotional stress, the nerve that controls this entire function is shut down. That means you've got an automatic nervous system. One keeps you alive under stress, the other regenerates tissue. And so when you're in a stress state, blood supply to the gut is shut down, and that blood is funneled from the gut to the arms and legs so you can run away. We look at the autonomic nervous system. We look at the nerve that comes from the diaphragm to make sure the diaphragm's working correctly. And this is why, if there is this part of the stomach is called the hiatus. If this thing is pooching up inside of that diaphragm, we've got to restore the curve in the neck to restore the nerve supply. We've got to take this and pull this down. And literally, you're taking that left fist, putting it kind of a little bit left in the midline, and breathe in, blow out, and you're pulling it down. So you're literally pulling the stomach down. And when you breathe in, that diaphragm comes down, and while you're pulling it down, then you blow out, you still hold this, the diaphragm comes up. So it's breathe in, blow out. So while I'm pushing down, the diaphragm's moving up. So we're literally separating those organs. And what you'll see in a lot of people, office workers, truckers, pilots, people that are sitting a lot, this liver can get adhesed to that diaphragm as well. And people typically forget how to diaphragmatic breathe. If you have any grandkids, watch them breathe. They already breathe correctly. Okay, adults forget. When you're breathing, and I say, okay, take a deep breath, most everybody breathes like this. Except that, you're only using the top portion of the lungs, which is the smallest. When you're breathing, that diaphragm comes down. If you can do that diaphragmatic breathing, you're using the bottom 2/3 of the lungs. So it looks like, so breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Now, diaphragmatic breathing, you're actually moving all the organ tissues here. So you're helping digestion, you're helping move the lymph. So carbohydrate digestion, you swallow it. Vagus nerve allows this to start to function correctly and has this beautiful wave. The protein is broken down in the stomach. It leaves the stomach. Now, what's interesting, there's a muscle on top of the stomach and a muscle on the bottom of the stomach. This is called the pyloric sphincter. That's the esophageal sphincter, or lower esophageal sphincter. So this stomach literally walls off the acid, okay, and sloshes it around. Now, under stress, or if this diaphragm's weak, that muscle doesn't work right. So then you get that acid reflux coming up inside. Now, in crazy world, which is where we are, instead of restoring the tone of the diaphragm, instead of teaching diaphragmatic, instead of pulling that stomach down, they give an antacid. That's okay. Another 50 years, none of that stupidity will be going on. So then, when the stomach has broken down the protein, this valve opens. As soon as fat hits here, that gallbladder excretes, the pancreas excretes the bicarb, it raises the pH and it goes through that jejunum and then the ileum, and then it dumps itself in the large intestine. And there's another valve here. It's called the ileocecal, since this is a cecum valve. Now, attached to this is one of the most brilliant organs you got, called the appendix. And the appendix is actually designed to repopulate the intestinal tract. If doctors don't understand the function of the appendix, they need to understand anatomy, because most of them don't. It's like if you have your gallbladder removed, you have to increase your fats, because otherwise, without the gallbladder there, the liver's still producing bile, but it's going to constantly drip in that duodenum, creating duodenal ulcers. And then without the bile to break down those fats, people will be fatty acid deficient. So that means hair, skin, nails, all of that stuff doesn't get produced. Poor hormone production. So anyone that's had the gallbladder removed has to increase their fats. Now, in the last 30 years, almost 30 years I've been doing this, I've never heard of a doctor saying, we're going to remove your gallbladder, you must increase your fat intake. Okay, so then it gets in this intestinal tract, and wait, what governs all of this? The vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve does the excretion, the motility, the function of all of this. Here's the weird part. That's only 10% of its function. 90% of that vagus nerve function is sensory. Why is that sensory input into the brain so important? Because this is not about digestion. This is about your immune system. This is about tissue production. This is about brain function. It's called the gut brain, the enteric brain. There's more neuronal connections here than the brain, just about. When you're looking at this, this is absolutely vital. Anybody that's taken an antacid or digestion enhancers, any kind of medication, laxatives, without fixing the problem is doing themselves harm. To get 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 with healthy bodies and brains, you have to build healthy cells, and that's what this is. So digestion occurs with thought, smell, mastication, acid excretion, bile, and then the bicarb. That's literally the process here. Then, no water a half hour before or after a meal. Why? I mean, you could take supplements because you smell something, the stomach produces acid. Water dilutes the acid. Diaphragmatic breathing all throughout the day, that helps the lymph. What kind of diet? What's the best diet for a human being? Talk to your great-great-grandmother. You know her. She only ate organic. She only ate fresh. That girl walked every day. I mean, it's not that hard. Healthy animals, if you're going to eat animals. If not, healthy animal products. So if an animal's sick, don't eat it. No processed foods and no chemicals. It's really basic. There's not a lot of challenges. There's no secret. Okay? Any questions about this? Okay. She had her appendix out when she had her first child because the doctor was already in there and he saw the appendix and he thought, I'm in there, let's just take it out. Okay? Now, and this I've heard multiple times. Okay, you sign the release, you go under the knife, they can do whatever they want, just about. Now, the appendix, if you've had it removed, because its job, if you get diarrhea, and your body is designed to eliminate things, to either alkalinize, which is what diarrhea is, or it's getting rid of toxins. This little appendix repopulates the intestinal tract with healthy bacteria. So if you've had the appendix removed, you have a 60% increased risk of colon cancer. Some of the best data on appendixes is from Germany. So just be aware that you're going to have to get fermented foods. If you've had your appendix removed, fermented foods with every meal or every day. You know, kombucha, sourdough bread, yogurts, you know, fermented ice creams, dark beer. Look, it's not just for breakfast anymore. Yes.
So you touched on this briefly, but so she had her appendix and her gallbladder.
Yeah, perfect.
So then fat.
Yeah. So when you've had your appendix removed and your gallbladder removed, okay, you have to increase your healthy fats. That just for the heck of it, okay, let's have the gallbladder and the appendix removed. Now, let's give a whiplash trauma in the neck, compromising the nerve to the diaphragm. Now you got a setup for disaster. So how do you correct that? You restore the curve in the neck, you teach diaphragmatic breathing, you pull that stomach down so the stomach can get down here so that lower esophageal sphincter can work. And then you increase the healthy fats with every meal. And then you do this, no water a half hour before a meal, diaphragmatic breathe throughout the day, fresh, organic, varied variety of foods, healthy animal products, no processed. And you do that, and then fermented foods, you're going to have no issues. But wait, should we also change sleep patterns? I know I'm consistently irritating. What's the number one thing I ask every time when I see you in the morning? I say, Sawadee krap, how did you sleep? Consistently irritating. Because sleep is when the body regenerates. You need good function here for that. Then that brain controls everything. Any other questions? Yes.
If we eat a high carbohydrate diet,
Okay, if we eat a high carbohydrate diet, would we damage our brains? Dr. McCullough, Dr. McDougall, Northern California, runs the clinic True North. He coins a term instead of carbohydrates, because almost every kind of plant is going to be broken down. The carbohydrates are broken down to usable sugars. He calls them healthy starches. Healthy starches built mankind. Wheat built Egypt. Wheat built the pyramids, okay? The Punjab region of India has been growing wheat for 10,000 years. Corn built the Americas. Rice built Asia. Okay, without those healthy starches, we would not have a good population. But what do you balance that with? You're getting proteins from some of the starches. Okay, you're getting a lot of carbohydrates. You got to have it balanced. Now, I'm talking, normal, healthy grains, not the genetically modified, not the ones sprayed with glyphosates, good, normal, healthy, ancient grains. Okay, and then if you get sourdough, it literally, that bacteria breaks down the grains further. So preparing it, making sure it's organic, as healthy as possible, and then those are healthy starches that can help you. What does damage the brain is poor movement and poor nerve supply to the gut, because this is neurotransmitter production. Does that make sense? So this is the gut brain, the enteric brain. So and there's only 3 things you got to fix. I don't think I've ever told anyone this. You just had physical, chemical, and emotional stress? Did I tell you that? Because under all of those stressors, blood supply to the gut shuts down. The physical stressors, loss of curve in the neck is going to alter this. And this is why I talk about forward head care. This is why in 2 weeks, we do post x-rays so I can see. So I either yell at you or I high five you. Good job, brother. Okay, so yes, it will not cause damage. It has built societies, but now you take those ancient grains, amaranth, quinoa, and you process them, or you harvest them with chemicals, or you package them so they can stay on a shelf for weeks to months. You remove the metabolic and digestive enzymes. It's like coca leaves. You can chew coca leaves and, you're just going to have like a cup of coffee rush. you get the white powder of the coca leaves, you can cause a stroke and brain damage. Any other questions? Kapun krap.